All right, we're gonna begin. It is 11, and we have a pretty full room, so we'll start. So again, most of you probably know me by now. My name is Tucker. I work here at COS. I'm in the office of the general manager, which means my job is first and foremost to make him look good, and B, it's about creating systems and helping create systems that remove waste and help him optimize the system as the conductor of our orchestra a little bit better. And with me, I have the keynote speaker, if you will, Mark Rosenthal. Mark, for those of you who don't know Mark, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Gosh, what do you want me to say? I've been doing continuous improvement since roughly 1989, just learning about it. So I continue to learn and hope to share some of the things I've learned with you today.
Yeah, and the specific topic we'll be looking at is Kata. Kata is something new to us, new for us for the last like 2 years or so. It has been something that we've implemented, we've struggled through it, and we've learned a lot through that. And Mark is kind of going to give a high-level overview of what Kata is, which will kind of set us up for the next few episodes that we're doing, which gets more into the nitty-gritty details of what Kata is and how it works. So that's kind of the agenda today. With me, I have a variety of COS colleagues as well. I won't introduce that, have them speak up, but you might be in the breakout room with Robert or Daryl, and they're part of our team, which is pretty cool that they get to be a part of this. So just a reminder, if you aren't speaking, just go ahead and put your stuff on mute so we don't have any weird feedback or anything like that. And so with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Mark, and he's going to help us understand what Kata is and why you should care about it. Go for it, Mark.
Actually, yeah, cool. So I'm going to run this through a short slide deck, and it's mostly just so I remember what to say. That's the whole point of this. So I want to start with that. When I look, when other people look, the literature, if you really dissect what really good, excellent organizations have, one of the things you find consistently is that they're really good at problem solving from top to bottom, the whole organization. This is especially true at our benchmark company of Toyota. In fact, Steve Spear, who's a researcher, talks about them as a community of scientists, which is a really interesting term to use when he's talking about people on the shop floor. So that skill is what gives them excellence in the here and now. But the other thing that you have is that you see systems that are geared toward developing people's problem-solving skills. So it's not just hiring for it, but it is creating it in the course of day-to-day work. And that is creating excellence in the future. Now, rather than listening to me talk about what this looks like, what I've done is I've taken, there's a video which I may show the whole thing at some point, but it's a video of Mike Rother, who wrote the book Toyota Kata, and he's coaching a team leader at a tier 1 Toyota supplier in Michigan. I stripped out all the Toyota Kata stuff. What I want you to do is I want you to listen simply to how Theresa here, just listen to how in depth she can go in describing how the process that she oversees works. So she's the first level of leadership. She is still on the hourly payroll. She gets a small differential for the role she has. She oversees the work of probably 1 or 2 cells, 4 to 6 people. So that's the level of leadership. And just listen to how smoothly she can describe to Mike what's going on in her process.
So we originally did a cycle study on here, and there should be maybe the daily requirements about overtime. We did see a large variance in the 3rd cycle.
So that's what's going on now.
What we're looking at, this is the current flow.
Yeah.
And there's 3 people. The blue is the first person.
Oh yeah, I see.
Second's purple, and this is the 3rd. So we drew this out. We noticed there was a lot of wasted motion in there. But even if we reduce the motion,
Yeah.
we're still going to be in good shape to not work overtime.
Okay.
So I think
Okay.
our focus is wrong, and we need to look at this. This may prevent our having them work overtime with this large variance. So some days they work and some days they don't.
Right.
So we need to understand what the variance is.
So what she's done, just because she knows how to do it, is map out the standard work in the process, do time study, calculate the tack time, the plan cycle time, and understands the cadence of the work and understands that variation in that cadence is causing them problems to work overtime. She wasn't taught to do that in the course of the Toyota Kata class she was taking. She already knew how to do that because that is just what she gets by working there. So think about for a minute, actually I'm going to have you think about it for a few minutes and speak amongst yourselves about it. You know, what in the company, how does somebody at her level get so good at this? This is not a dedicated continuous improvement person. This is somebody who is every day on the shop floor overseeing the work. And she happens to be in industry, but you can see the same thing in healthcare. You can see the same thing in other venues. So how does a team leader develop these skills? What has to be true for team members at all levels for them to become skilled at these things? What has to be going on in the company? But what I'm going to ask you to do here actually is disengage from the company for a second. And this is going to be kind of a discussion in our breakout rooms. Learning a skill in general. So think about a time that you personally have mastered a skill at some point in your life, being skiing, playing the guitar. At some point in your life, you have gained a skill that you're pretty good at. So think back to when you were first learning that skill and think what that was like. And especially, what assistance did you get? What instruction? How did that instruction go? How did you practice? How were you guided? Oops, back up. What was the nature of the assistance that you got? So that's kind of the first breakout room assignment here. And we'd like you to do is pop in into small little groups and just discuss these things for about 10 minutes, and then we'll draw you all back. Okay. So
and everyone's back, Mark. Go for it.
Cool. Okay. I can get this to work. There we go. So just to, this is what good sports teams do, and this came up a couple of times, is that they practice the fundamentals. They practice to a consistent playbook, and they work hard to execute consistently. Because executing consistently into a standard way is more important than trying to continuously go beyond their ability. So they work to perfect being consistent. This is what you see in the NFL. This is what you see this is what you see in Olympics is to be consistent and then to make small changes to move up a level. It was something that came out really well in the breakout room I was just in, is anything worth doing well is worth doing badly. If you're not willing to operate just beyond your ability and not willing to look like you don't know how, you are never going to get better. So that was just another interesting little point. So people learn what they practice. And one of our things here is we have a mindset and culture that we saw that Theresa has, because when she looks at a process, she's going to be thinking in terms of what's the heartbeat, what's the standard work, where's the extra motion, why is this taking as long as it does? She's just going to reflex to that. And she learned that by practice and correction with her boss. And even before she was a team leader, with her team leader asking the same kinds of questions. So the question for us in our companies is, what are we practicing? And there's a great graphic that Mike Rother puts up And this is the classic way to do improvement is we'll do it for 5 days, and then we'll spend the next 20 weeks just going about our normal business. And then maybe we'll have another improvement event for 5 days, and then we'll go back to business as usual. What are we learning? What are the people learning in this kind of environment? Are they learning to do improvement, or are they learning business as usual? What are they practicing on a daily basis? So if improvement is an exception, we can't expect it to become embedded in the way people think. So what should we be teaching them to practice, and how should we teach it kind of comes into the question. So this is kind of setting up for our next level of discussion here, but I kind of want to go through some characteristics of a continuous improvement culture, largely of Toyota, but you see it elsewhere too. The first is that there's actually a standard structure for how they go about doing problem solving and improvement. There's a way they talk about it. Inside Toyota, they call it the Toyota Business System. It used to be called A3. It's fundamentally an 8-step process. Not surprisingly, the Toyota Kata process mirrors it. That structure is used by leaders to solve cross-functional problems. And the leaders teach the standard by following the standard and setting the example. At the same time, that structure is also taught by leaders along with basic industrial engineering skills that you see that Theresa has. And the leaders are going to reference and teach that structure whenever improvement or problem solving is even being discussed. It's always going to be within the framework. So it's standard work. The leaders then also establish the direction for improvement in problem solving. And I know in my breakout room, the idea of always working a little beyond your ability. And this is part of what we would call challenge. And by establishing the direction and priorities, they also give permission not to try to fix everything at once. So they focus the effort within the framework. What problem are we actually trying to solve? And experimenting to learn what works and what doesn't isn't like permitted, it's expected. So the leaders are insisting that if you tell them something, it's derived from direct observation, it's derived from experimentation. It isn't your opinion. You have to bring objective evidence to the conversation, or they will send you back to get that objective evidence. So I remember one time I was on the shop floor at a Boeing supplier, and we were visited, and it's a long backstory, but we were visited by the president of a consulting company called Shinkajitsu, which was some of my teachers. These guys all learned from Taiichi Ono, who's largely responsible for putting this culture into place at Toyota. And I showed him, we were walking out to the shop floor, and I was showing Mr. Awada a scrap of paper, really with my scribbles on it of the data I had collected by observing already. And the only question he asked was, did you get this yourself by actually watching? And I said I had. And then his comment was, that's the most valuable piece of paper in this company right now. So that was a kind of an example of that last piece. So we're going to kind of kick back out here, and I'm going to, this is good. We'll have some time for Q&R. I want to now ask you, okay, based on what we've just said, how does problem solving in your organization differ from the characteristics that we just went through? Okay. So what gaps exist in the way your organization goes about problem solving versus the standard? So what gaps exist between this standard and your actual condition? And as you can see, we're already starting to incorporate some of the language here. And what might be the benefits of everyone in the organization striving to follow the same structure? Does that make sense to everybody? So this is the same thing. Let's just discuss these things for 10 minutes. And really the key, I'm going to come back to this slide. The key is to review it. There is a structure that leaders teach by following that structure. So what's the gap? You know, how do in your organization, how do you go about problem solving? Is there a way? Is it the way everybody does it? Is it taught as the reference standard when we discuss problem solving? Is there a consistent way that we go about it? Is there a good sense of direction and challenge what should be worked on and what we are not choosing to not work on? And what is considered valid information and where does it come from? And do leaders push on getting information from experiments or direct observation, or is, versus weighed opinion and that sort of thing? So that's really what I'd like to do, is have you all discuss the differences between your organization and this picture. Okay, so let's take 10 minutes and let's do that.
Rooms are open, and I'll see you in about 8 to 10 minutes. Awesome.
Okay.
Take it away.
All right, thank you. So back up. Pressed the wrong button, didn't I? No. Okay, there I am. All right. Got too much going on my computer. So we talked really about some characteristics. And one of the interesting things about it, to me at least, is that what we're doing is we're defining a gap. And that is part of that standard structure for problem solving that you see consistently. And once you have a gap, then you follow that structure to close the gap. So what we're really doing is very quickly here, we've gone through the first part when we looked at Theresa. That's kind of establishing a direction we want to go. And what we're doing here is we're very quickly saying, okay, in our organizations, what's the current condition? Where are we now in comparison to where we would like to be? So just to move on, you've seen this part. So what we've known for a long time, I mean, decades, is that at our benchmark company, in Toyota, that they've been very good at structuring the work itself to facilitate good problem solving. We know that they do this through coaching of others. What we have been scratching our heads about for a long time was exactly how does this coaching conversation go? How do they get so good? And that was a question that Mike Rother sought to answer with some actual formal academic research. He got a grant from the University of Dortmund. He spent a number of years studying Toyota and then experimenting in other companies. And what he was trying to do was to answer two fundamental questions. First was, this is out of his research, what are the unseen managerial routines and thinking that lie behind Toyota's success with continuous improvement? So we know what the tools are. We know what standard work is. We know what 5S is. We know all of that stuff. But there's routines in the way they interact with each other, which are invisible to us if you're taking the factory tour or even spending time there. So what exactly is going on in these conversations? What's the underlying structure in these conversations? And what he did to answer that question was he parsed hundreds of these coaching conversations, and the way I describe it is he put it all in a big pot and he boiled it down until there was just a little bit left at the bottom. And what was left at the bottom was the structure that's underlying what just sounds like a conversation about the problem, but there were key elements that were always there. And then his other question was, okay, how can the rest of us develop similar routines and thinking in our organizations? What can we do to learn this? And this was what resulted in what he called kata. And kata is a thing from martial arts. Wax on, wax off. That's a kata. It's the fundamentals. In my breakout in the first session, you're talking, one person was talking about softball. You have to know how to hit. You have to know how to catch. You have to know how to throw. You have to know when to throw and who to throw to. And those are fundamentals that you have to practice before the game. It's too late to learn those in the game. And so what practice routines can we use? And so what he developed was 2 practice routines. And the first one he calls the Improvement Kata, and it has 4 fundamental steps. One is understand the direction and challenge, which is the bigger picture of where you're trying to go. So at a higher level, what problem am I trying to solve as an organization? And maybe it's I need to get my lead time down to 3 days, because right now it's at 6 weeks. Or what am I trying to learn about? Wilbur Wright said, I want to fly. That was his direction and challenge. Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. Everything he's doing at SpaceX is based on that direction and challenge that he's set. Okay, where are we now? So I love the word grasp because it's visceral. I have to take it in my hand. I have to feel it. So grasping the current condition is really asking, okay, what do I know about this process? What do I not know? Mapping it out, doing what Theresa did, and just understanding at a very low level what's going on, and really understanding the boundary between what I know and what I do not. Based on that information, I'm not going to get all the way to the challenge at once. I'm going to do is I'm going to say, where am I trying to go? And typically we would say in a couple of weeks, where am I trying to go 2 weeks from now? Where do I want to be? This whole thing might be a year. Where do I want to be in a week? Where do I want to be in 2 weeks? What is my process going to look like at that point? And that is a colleague of mine says, he's thinking, what condition are you targeting? It's about what is your process going to look like, not simply what metrics are going to look like. So where are you striving to go next? And then the other part of that is, now what obstacles do I have to overcome in order to get there? And that's not all of the problems that I'm facing trying to get here. It's just the problems I'm facing trying to get to this next target condition. So I'm making a much shorter list now. Then experimenting against those obstacles and running one very, very quick cycles of what do I need to do to learn? What do I need to do based on what I know now? What do I learn next? And running running experiments against those obstacles. And this is the fundamental improvement kata structure. So on a graphical view, if this is the direction or challenge that I'm trying to move in, this is the current condition of where I'm at now. This is now I'm going to establish a target condition. It's not all the way there, but it's beyond what I know. I don't know exactly how to get to that target condition. And I've got obstacles and problems in the way. And what that means is that I don't know the path that I'm going to actually end up following. I don't even know which obstacles I'm going to end up overcoming. I don't even know what they all are when I begin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be running experiments, and each step of the way, I will be learning. And as I learn a little bit, then I will advance my threshold of knowledge, and I should be pulling the current condition up behind me here, because the current condition changes as I go, right? And I learn a little more, and my threshold of knowledge advances. And I learn a little more, And if I find myself at my target condition, then I take a step back and I say, where am I now? I grasp the current condition again and establish a new target condition and just keep going. So this is the process that we call the improvement kata. The other role here is the coach. And here's what's fundamentally different here is that in a lot of businesses, the boss tells you the answer. He says, hey, here's the solution and just go implement it. But in this model, honestly, if I'm coaching, even if I know the answer, I do not. It's my job is not to tell them what to do. My job is to keep them experimenting well, to keep them in this corridor. Is the practice of improvement being done correctly? So one of the interesting things in the reading I've been doing lately is I used to say that the coach's job is to ensure that the learner is working on the right things the right way. And I've reversed that because it's more important to be working the right way on the right things. So one of the things that I have in the research I've been doing that came across that really hit me was that within this company, if somebody gets a great accomplishment, but they didn't follow good problem solving practice to do it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. You don't get credit for it. It's how did you get there is more important than where you ended up. And that's really telling because that's how you develop the Theresas of the world. How did you get there? Are you following and teaching our process? So is the learner practicing inside the rails, or is the learner deviating, jumping to conclusions? Is the learner, and that's a teachable moment. So the coach's job now is to ask additional questions, to follow up, and to get the learner back on track. So the purpose of the coaching questions, and I'll just go through them verbally in a minute, is to determine where the learner's threshold of knowledge is. And then that next experiment should be something that's designed to advance that threshold of knowledge. It's not just a to-do. Again, we're going to go into this stuff in depth. This is a quick overview. So what I would like to do is, I want to stop share here. We've got some time. So if I were coaching, and this is the questions that Mike was asking Theresa, the first question is, okay, what is your target condition? Actually, question 0 is what's the challenge you're working on, but that's typically we just ask, okay, what is your target condition? And I want to hear the learner tell me where she's trying to go in terms of how is her process going to be working in the future. So it's really a present tense statement. It's not a to-do. It's not I'm trying to. It is I'll give you a real one. On May 2nd, my process will be operating with no more than 4 days of WIP between each process. Okay. And to achieve that, and then I'll have the lead time I want. Okay. So the next question, what's the actual condition now? How's the process operating today? And you saw Theresa was beginning to describe that. She had tons of variation in operator 3, and that was driving all kinds of overtime. Then we do some reflection. What did you plan? What did you say you were going to do? The question is, what did you plan as your last step? But really it's, what did you tell me in our last cycle what did you commit to do in order to learn? And what did you expect? So I asked you to tell me what you were going to do and to make a prediction. Okay, what actually happened? And what did you learn? And that's the most powerful question in the entire deck. Based on that, list the obstacles that you think are in the way. So what obstacles do you think are in the way of getting to your target? And which one of those obstacles are you addressing now? And we'll dig into that one problem at a time. If you're trying to work multiple problems, the worst thing that can happen is you make multiple changes and it works, because then you have no idea why it worked, because it could have been any combination or one or the other. And then, okay, so what are you planning as your next step or experiment? And what do you expect? What do you expect to learn by taking that step? And then finally, how quickly can we go and see what you've learned, or what we have learned? I always mess that one up. So with that, we've got some questions already coming. And I'm going to start with, gosh, I got to roll back. So I hear obstacles that come in our way may simply require an action. Not all obstacles will be experiments. Yeah, but every action is an experiment, because you don't really know what's going to happen until you do it. So maybe I'm going to take this action and I expect some kind of outcome. Let's write that down. What actually happened? How many times have you done a no-brainer action item and not even looked back at whether it had the effect you intended it to, or didn't have an idea, really clear idea what the intended effect was, or you've done it and it didn't come out quite the way you thought? So even those no-brainers can sometimes, or should be, thought of as experiments. If I leave for the airport now, I should be there in 40 minutes. That's still a prediction.
Yeah, Mark, that's a good point. Especially with what we found is, like, this is the starter kata, right? And it's a really structured way of learning. But those questions are really helpful questions. When we do our daily check-ins, we ask the same thing. What do you expect to have happen when you do, even one of your action items? And what actually happened? What did you learn? It builds in like little bits of reflection instead of reflecting at the end of a month or at the end of a quarter or whatever. It's daily, like, this is what we're learning. I'm talking more about that. One of the questions I want to make sure we cover, because I think it's a really good one that's really applicable, is from Robert. When is it appropriate for the coach to give clear direction, information, suggestions, and feedback to help the learner move forward versus simply asking questions? I know for me, with my teams, it's some of you who know me well, this might not be a shock, but it's really hard for me not to just jump in there and just give them the answers and help them. So where do you find that balance, that line?
That's what kind of comes, you have to know the learner and you have to come with a little bit of experience, but it's quite appropriate for the coach to drop into teaching mode and perhaps do it side by side. So for grasping the current condition, there are starter kata that might call starter kata. There's specific things we want to do, like take times, like get the cycle times of the process. Well, if somebody has no idea how to do that, I can't just ask them, well, what do your exit cycles look like? I can't just ask Theresa, how do you quantify the variation you have? She has to have that skill. So sometimes she has to practice that. So that's what I want to do, though, is I want to teach them better ways to see for themselves rather than just tell them what the answer is. Did that answer the question? Whoever had it? It's a great conversation. Okay, I see. Yes, show up.
Awesome. The next question I want to pick out there is from Lisa Lamano from Nordstrom. Should there be a why for a target condition to ensure the target condition is the right place to be striving to achieve? Is it important to question why you're going in that direction that you're going?
I think it's important for the learner to understand the bigger picture, if that's what you mean. What's the strategy that we're implementing? What I see too often is actually the opposite, where I will see a company will have like a financial strategy and they will just blow that all the way down to the shop floor, and people are going, okay, what do you want me to do? And you've got to translate as it rolls, to the levels of the organization. You've got to translate that objective to something that's meaningful for them, that they're to carry out in their process. And so, we don't know more than a 2-week lead time. Okay, well, this part of the value stream, how much of that 2 weeks do they get? And that becomes their challenge, for example.
The one thing that Lisa learned, I was her first kata coach. Actually, her and her team made a lot of progress with kata. It was really fun to see. And one of the biggest learnings and reflections they had when we took a step back and reflected is the value of having little bit daily improvements. And instead of, oh, I'm going to send an email and wait 2 weeks or whatever, it's that idea of like, if we're learning every day and making small steps, it becomes a lot less overwhelming. So really awesome. And then we have time for one more question, which I really like Donald's question, which apparently we kind of achieved the goal, I guess. So you got at least one person to say, okay, where do I start? Like this is awesome. So which organizational level is the best place to start with kata? Like where do you begin? There's kata in secret, and then there's kata system. Can you give some insight into that?
So first is anybody at any level can do this. You don't need anybody's permission to work on being a better problem solver, and you don't need anybody's permission to teach your people to be better problem solvers. At the same time, if you're trying to get the culture that I described into place, if the conversation about improvement is not consistent from the top, then whoever is doing it at the middle is going to have to shield and translate. And it will never become part of the overall culture of the organization until the top people are speaking amongst themselves with the same structure. So you can make a lot of progress as an individual in the middle. And so don't give up, and you can learn a lot. But if the whole organization is seeking to change its culture, the culture is driven by the people who have the most influence. So the best place to start is with the leadership team. That's the best place to start. How often do we get to start there? Maybe a quarter of the time.
Awesome. We're just about out of time, Mark. We have about a minute and a half left. Do you have any final thoughts, closing remarks before everyone signs out?
So this was just a touch. Somebody in one of my breakout asked if there's a good reference. The Mike Rother has a book called the Toyota Kata Practice Guide, which is a step-by-step primer on the techniques here. His original book, Toyota Kata, is more of a high level, although that was the only book out there for about a decade. I have to also acknowledge that I am very biased because I helped to edit the practice guide. So my red ink is all over it. But it's pretty well done.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to second that. That's a solid book. It's like a how-to manual for this exact
and then
thing. So
Eric put Mike Rother's website in the chat, and he has got lots of good resources there.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Okay, so we are at time. Thank you so much for joining today. It was my pleasure to have Mark kind of speak more to kata, why it all matters, why we're doing this. And our next event, more on the mechanics of the how-to, is on May 11th, same time, 11 a.m. Feel free to register there if you haven't done so. If you've already registered for these events, you're already on the list. You'll be hearing from me with the link and all that fun stuff in the next
Bring your friends.
Days. Yes, bring your friends for sure. And I'll be sending an email out shortly with the YouTube video. I try to get that done the same day for you guys to be able to share, and for those who weren't able to join us live. So I think that's all. Feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions or want to connect with Mark and that sort of thing. So awesome. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care. Thank you all.
Everyone.
Appreciate it.